Hi guys, so welcome to hour 3 of your Yixing teapot. At this point you have a cylinder, you just reinforce the inside seam with the coil, and now we're going to start shaping it. So I initially tried to go in with a paddle. It wasn't really working, it felt a little awkward, so what I started doing is I started kind of shaping it with my hands. Now what I'm doing here is my inside hand is doing this kind of scooping method, and then my outside hand is holding itself at like an angle to help create a rounded form. I am personally going for a rounded form on this teapot, depending on what you chose, and you can see what I'm doing there. Depending on what you chose, you'll want to have your form pulled up in front of you to reference as you're sculpting today. So I do a combination of things. I kind of sculpt and mold with my hands. I use the paddle. I'll use the rib or the kidney, so you'll see all of that happening. But yeah, so as you're paddling, one thing to note is that if you look at like kind of how lopsided it is, that's okay. You'll be able to kind of fix it as you go. Another thing to notice is that I continuously spin my piece, okay? That's something you'll definitely want to do. Okay, so when I'm paddling, by the way, you can see right there, my hand's coming in, the inside hand is at an angle, and then the outside hand is like paddling it. What this is doing is it's help getting that rounded shape where the like middle parts of that wall is kind of more poking out, and then the top part of the cylinder is a smaller, diameter, right? I switch between working at the top and at the bottom. You don't want to kind of go all in at like one side of your teapot. You want to kind of gradually bring it to the extent that you want it to be. One thing to notice right there is that clay started acting like that. It was kind of folding over itself. That was just because the cylinder, the way that it was, made it a little inconvenient for that circled form, so I had to kind of paddle it out. Now what you see me doing here is I'm grabbing a bowl. Depending on your form, this might be something that is useful. For me, it wasn't really that useful. So you'll find something, I used a vase here that was like a good size for what I was going for. But to help round out that bottom part, like that bottom half of my teapot, this might be something that's useful for you if you're able to find a bowl or something that's going to help you. But like I said, it wasn't that great for me, so I did kind of stop after a while. But yeah, I go between paddling and shaping with my hands and all that fun stuff. Now, one thing I really want to send home with you guys is that you need to be careful about exaggerating that top kind of circle, so where the opening of the teapot would be, where you're going to put the lid. You don't want that to flare out too much. So having your hand at a diagonal at all times, most Yixing teapots do kind of have that rounded form to some extent. Having your hand at that diagonal, tapping it, paddling it at a diagonal is super critical. Now what you see me doing here is I'm trimming my teapot down. If you remember, I made my cylinder 4 inches in height instead of 3 inches in height. This is where I started noticing that was just too tall for this Yixing teapot, so I cut it down. Now this is definitely something that you don't want to do. You don't want to cut off like an inch of clay for your teapot, especially if you only have 3 inches in height right now for your cylinder. But this might be useful if you're paddling your teapot or shaping it and the top of it, like this rim area, starts getting uneven. You can see that it's really flattened out now that I cut it. So the way I did that is you saw me use that needle tool. I just spun my piece around on the table, held my needle tool at the same level, so I was making a straight line, and then I did that same thing while cutting it. Okay. So I basically just go back and forth between paddling and shaping for right now, and then more towards the end is where I pull out that kidney. And the diagonal angle that I hold my hand on the inside, it kind of gets more dramatic each time or as time progresses. And I want to say too that this took me about 30 minutes to shape it into this that you see at the end, really. I don't think I was really fully done by then. I still had some shaping to kind of do and go about, but now as you're shaping your teapot, One thing to look at is your teapot from the top-down perspective, so you can see that my outer kind of circle there is not lined up with that rim or the inner circle. You want it to look like a perfect bullseye. So looking at a top-down angle, looking at it from the side, kind of looking at it from all different perspectives is really what's going to help you realize what's uneven, what you need to kind of even out and make more perfect. We really want this Yixing teapot to look as perfect and really like not handmade as possible. You want it to look like it was thrown on the wheel instead of being hand-built. So yeah, this is, I'm just kind of shaping it, and now in a second I'm going to start using my kidney, my rib, to help shape the teapot and to smooth out my walls. Okay. So you can see here I paddled that side and I had that clay kind of overlapping or folding onto itself again. The inside was looking great, but the outside was not. So I used that rib to like scrape off that excess clay that was just not, you know, meant to be on my teapot. Instead of blending it out and kind of pushing it around, I just scraped it off. And I do end up using the kidney for like emphasizing my bottom, really creating a difference between the bottom and the wall of my teapot, and you'll see what I mean when we get there, but yeah. So at this point I start using my rib to smooth out the walls and to kind of make my teapot more even. Notice I'm continually spinning the teapot. I kind of was adding pressure from the inside and supporting it on the outside by scraping the rib along with it. I'm going back in with my hands and pinching. Right, I'm looking from a top-down perspective, trying to make sure that it looks perfect and centered. That inside rim is looking, you know, equal to the outside, or like that outer middle part of that wall of the teapot. That when I'm looking at it from the side, it doesn't look like one side's poking out too much. It looks like it's a perfect circle, right, or whatever form you're going for. Okay, so at this point, you kind of saw it when I was turning it over. The wall of it was a little awkward. It was a little bit more of a like a crease than I'd want it to be. I want it to be more kind of rounded and natural looking. So I begin eventually here to start tapping that out. Right now I'm really just defining this bottom area. The way that I kind of went about it is I paddled like the top half of the wall and then I paddled the bottom half of the wall. Now I'm using my hands to actually paddle for me too, something that could be useful. You'll want to find both a paddle, a tool to paddle, and maybe your hands also. For that tool, by the way, if you didn't remember from last class, you'll want to find something that's bigger than a ruler, something that's, I don't know, in general pretty good, a good size I would say. You can see that paddle right there works great. I'd say the material also matters. You don't want something that's crazy water resistant. If you could find something wooden, that'd be great. I would say a spatula is something that comes to mind for something that you have at home to use as a paddle. So like something you'd use to flip your pancakes or something. And if you do have something like that and it has like creases in it, or it's not like a flat surface, you'll just have to be wary about cleaning up those indentations it makes as you try to shape it. So now what I'm doing here is you can see me kind of rounding out that shape even more. I'm going in with my kidney. I start taking it off screen because when I'm getting into detail work, I kind of like to pull the clay piece more to my face, but yeah. So So this is kind of what I was mentioning about wanting to trim down the rim of my piece. Now that I got it mostly shaped, this is probably the point in time that you would do that. I saw that tiny little part on the right side of my pot right there was a little bit higher. So what I did is I got down on eye level with the rim of that teapot, and I saw that. So again, all different perspectives that you're really looking at. And I'm just using this knife to shape that inside rim and make it look nice and perfect instead of like bumpy with my fingerprints and all that. So this is that 4-inch in diameter circle that you may have made. Hopefully it still works for the sizing for you. You could see that my shape has changed from that 4-inch diameter base, so I'm gonna have to actually like trim it down a little bit, but yeah. Here I'm defining that base versus that wall. So I'm trying to make it have more of like an angled edge rather than a continuous curved shape. So it has a flat bottom to the teapot and not just a kind of circle ball shape. Now, another important piece of advice that I can give you is that where students go wrong is that they say it's good enough and that they kind of just throw in the bag or throw in the towel early. Really take your time with it. Don't stop until you feel like it's perfect. You know, really take your time with this. This is something you don't want to rush through. You want to go about this very slow. You want it to be a gradual process. If you rush it, you're most likely, you could potentially ruin it, you know. You could make the wall flare out too much. Different things could happen. So really take your time, have it be a gradual process. This day is really critical in creating the form that you want and creating the teapot that you want. So taking your time on this day really does matter. And that's pretty much it for today. So I like that shape. I felt comfortable stopping, and yeah. All right, well, have a good time making your teapots, and good luck.